Okay, good morning everybody. Today we're going to look at an interesting question in Jewish belief, and that is a question connected to the resurrection of the dead. Will Gentiles, will non-Jews be resurrected in the future times when the dead come back to life? This question is around one of the central beliefs of Judaism, and it's one that is listed in the 13 principles of faith that Maimonides, the great Rambam, lists as being essential beliefs of Judaism. That apart from believing in one God and in the divinity of the Torah and prophecy, there's a belief in Judaism that is central to Jewish belief, and that is that the Messiah will come, Mashiach will come to redeem the world. And sometime after the coming of the Messiah, there will be what's called Tchiyas HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. That the dead will come back to life. And this is something we mention in our prayers daily. It is a central article of faith. And Maimonides listed in the 13 principles which he formulated as being beliefs that are core beliefs of Judaism. I have it here on the sheet for you, number 1. In Maimonides' principles of faith, the 13th principle, which could be seen as the culmination of all of the principles of faith, is, I believe with perfect faith, that the dead will be brought back to life when God wills it to happen. Now, in that statement, there are no real details given as to who will be resurrected. All the dead that ever lived, will they all be resurrected and come back to life? It doesn't say it. It just says that we believe in resurrection. Resurrection means that souls will be returned to their bodies to live here in this physical world, down here. That is the belief. And the question we're going to look at is, who is included in this statement of resurrection? Is it a Jewish thing particularly? Is it the Jewish people will be revived? Or does it also include Gentiles, non-Jews? Is this belief something that is an exclusive thing, that only Jews will come back to life? Or does it include the Gentiles as well? That's what we're going to look at. No. Yeah. So, the way belief works in Judaism is belief is not a matter of opinion. It's not just like, so what do you reckon, or what do you think is right, or how do you feel? That's not how beliefs are developed in Judaism. Beliefs have to have sources. In Judaism, all of our principles of faith have to be derived from the sources of Judaism. And those sources are the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, which is the written Torah, or the oral tradition known as the Talmud, the Midrash, the teachings of the rabbis. An article of faith and any detail of that has to be sourced somewhere. We have to look into the sources. And so, including this question, will Gentiles be resurrected? The question is not a question that should be answered based on what we feel or what we think should happen. The question is, what does it say in the sources? What does the Torah say about such a thing? Now, of course, the reason we're asking the question is because there doesn't seem to be a very clear, definitive statement in the Torah about it. If the Torah would just say who is and who isn't resurrected, we wouldn't have to discuss it. It would be obvious. So sometimes in questions such as this that are not so explicitly dealt with in the sources, we have to look and try and derive from the sources what is going on. And an answer will be a part of our faith, whether it's a comfortable answer that we're happy with and it's politically correct and suitable or not. If it's not, then it's not. It's just how it is. So we're going to look into the sources in an unapologetic way and see what indeed does it say about Gentiles being resurrected in the future. The first source we're going to look at to answer the question is number 2. This is from the Midrash. The Midrash is again the oral tradition as it's been committed to writing almost 2,000 years ago, and the teachings of the Midrash are traditions usually that stretched long before it was written down. So this particular teaching is from a rabbi called Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said the following thing. The discussion in the Midrash was talking about the blessing of rainfall. And he was trying to express just how powerful the blessing of rain is. So he said, the rains are a greater blessing than the revival of the dead. Rainfall, the rain coming is a greater blessing than the revival of the dead. Why? He gives 2 reasons. For revival of the dead is for humans, while rain is for humans and animals alike, which answers your question that it's not for animals. But human beings are revived in the revival of the dead, animals are not. Whereas the rains are a blessing not just for human beings, but also for animals. All life forms dependent on rain. And so therefore, while Tchias Hameisim, the revival of the dead, is an amazing thing for human beings, but animals don't get it. Whereas rains are a blessing not just for humans, but for animals as well. And he continues, the revival of the dead is for Jews, while rains are for Jews and idolaters alike. Seeming to say, pretty clearly and rather explicitly, that revival of the dead is for Jews and not non-Jews. The idolaters do not experience it. Unlike the rains, which the rain falls not just for Jewish people, the rain falls for Jews and idol worshippers, everybody equally, whereas the revival of the dead is just for Jews. That's what it seems to be saying in this midrashic source, taking it as a fact, as just a simple assumption that only Jewish people are revived, whereas the rain falls for everybody. So if we would stop there, we would have a very simple, clear answer from the Midrash. The revival of the dead, Tchias Hameisim, is a Jewish thing. Non-Jews will not be revived. That's what it seems to say. Yeah? I mean, can you argue with that? Maybe you can?
You can.
How?
Because when the neshama comes down, it chooses its parents and everything. If there were so many Jewish people, the neshama would go into them, and there would be many more Jews.
Okay, so you're saying that a soul chooses its parents, and if revival of the dead is only for Jews, then all neshamas would choose Jewish parents. Well, first of all, where does it say that people choose their parents? The soul chooses their parents. Where's that from? What's the source of that? It's often said, but there aren't Jewish sources that say it. It's in Eastern religions they believe that people choose their parents. Sorry? It's a part of Eastern religion. It's often quoted, but there aren't Jewish sources that say we choose our parents. On the contrary, our soul is sent down to the parents that God chooses for us. If we choose our parents, then our choice may or may not be the right one. God's choice of our parents is the right one. I mean, it's a very clever thing to tell people that you choose your parents, because that way you can't blame them anymore. You chose them; it's your fault. That's quite a smart thing. But an even deeper thing is to say God chose your parents. So if it wasn't your error of judgment or rash decision, or it was a divine decision that this is where your soul belongs. So yeah. Sorry?
Only a Jewish belief in the soul, therefore it's a Jewish soul which goes into the child of Jewish.
Right, well, yeah, definitely Jewish soul is born to Jewish parents, although it does happen that there's a hidden Jewish soul born in a non-Jewish body that has to return to the Jewish people through conversion. There is such a thing. And again, that's divinely ordained, that for whatever reason God decided this soul belongs in this family and has to make its journey back to its people. Yeah.
When it talks about two categories of Jews and idolaters, there could be a third category of people who are not idolaters and not Jews.
Okay, so there is a bit of wiggle room there, because it doesn't say Jews and Gentiles, it says Jews and idolaters. So there are people who are neither Jews nor idolaters, and maybe they fit into a category that's not mentioned here. That could be. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. Interestingly, when it says idolaters in Talmudic literature, so sometimes it's being specific. It means idol worshippers, as opposed to a Gentile who doesn't worship idols. Sometimes it means all Gentiles, but the censor of the Talmud, there were non-Jewish censors who looked through the Talmud and sometimes had Jewish accomplices, and they made sure that there was no references in any disparaging way to non-Jews. So sometimes the idolater was a way of making it sound like we're not talking about non-Jews, we're talking about idol worshippers. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We'll have to see if we can wiggle into this midrash a new interpretation.
This is also a
No, Midrash is from God. It's said by,
It's not him quoting it.
because he taught it. This was a tradition. That's what the oral tradition is. The oral tradition is traditions that were handed down to Moses by God, but by word of mouth, not written down. So so a Midrash or a Talmudic quote is the divine wisdom as it has been shared by people, has been handed down through people. So it is a part of Torah equally. So
Excuse me, so the word Gentile just means someone who's not
Gentile means any non-Jew. An idolater is describing a particular type of non-Jew, a non-Jew who worships idols. So the question is, sometimes the word idolater is used generally because in those times, Talmudic times, all non-Jews worshipped idols. Whereas sometimes not. Sometimes idolater is specifically an idol-worshipping non-Jew, whereas not all non-Jews do worship idols. So we'll have to see if we can find something there. Look at source number 3. Number 3 is Maimonides. So Maimonides is a codifier of Jewish law. He is living almost 1,000 years after the time of the Midrash. And he codified Jewish law, meaning all of the various different opinions and discussions of the Talmud, he put them into clear, final decisions. Not that Maimonides is the last word in Jewish law, but he was a codifier. He put Jewish law into a clear, succinct, and organized form. So this is from his Laws of Repentance, where he's talking about people's various spiritual levels. And he says the following: every Jew has a portion in the world to come. As it states, your people are all righteous, they will inherit the land for eternity. The land here is metaphorical, meaning the land of eternal life. So every Jewish soul has a level of righteousness that will eventually be revealed, and every Jewish soul will eventually repent and do tshuva, and so therefore every Jew has a portion in the world to come. And so too, continues Maimonides, the righteous of the nations have a portion in the world to come. That a righteous non-Jew will also have a portion in the world to come. The difference is that every Jewish soul has a level of righteousness in it which will eventually be revealed. Even a Jew who seems wicked, so in this incarnation or the next incarnation, their righteousness will be revealed, they will be purified eventually, and that soul will have a portion in the world to come. With the non-Jew, so if a non-Jew lives a righteous life, lives an upright moral life, they don't have to be Jewish, they don't have to convert to Judaism, they don't have to keep the Torah, they have to keep the Noahide laws, the laws that apply to all mankind, to live a moral life. A righteous Gentile will have a portion in the world to come as well. So this statement of Maimonides seems to contradict the Midrash that we just quoted. The Midrash says that the revival of the dead is only for Jews. Whereas Maimonides is saying that the world to come, which is talking about the future times, a non-Jew has a part in that as well. If they're righteous, they also have a part.
Is that the same as Mason though? It's like a little harder.
Well, that's the question. What is the world to come? What is meant by the world to come? What could it mean? What are the possible meanings of it? It means not this world, not the world as we know it, but the world that is coming in the future.
Could be reading the Shama's go after you die.
Right. So it could be the place where souls go after you die. I mean, it could be in the Garden of Eden, as we call it, the Garden of Eden, heaven, the afterlife. It could be that. Or it could be talking about the time of the revival of the dead, which is the world to come. Some argue that the world to come must be talking about the revival of the dead, because you can't call it the world to come if you're talking about heaven, because that's not to come. That is, it's here and now already. People are there, souls are there already. It's not a future life. It's happening now. Whereas others say that no, world to come refers to the world that you go to after this life. Just like in English we call it an afterlife. Even though it exists now, but for us it's in the future, so we call it the world to come. So we'll have to analyze what indeed does Maimonides mean here when he says the world to come. That will also be important. So first of all, we need to understand what's his source. If the Midrash says that idolaters don't experience the revival of the dead, so what's Maimonides' source to say that the righteous of the nations do have a portion in the world to come? Where does he get that from? He's quoting a Mishnah that this statement of Maimonides is quoting a Mishnah, which is a teaching from the Talmud, the oral tradition, that says that every Jew has a portion in the world to come. It's a very interesting Mishnah. It says, we're going to quote some of it later, where it starts by saying every Jew has a portion of the world to come, and these are the ones who don't. And then it lists several Jewish people who don't have a portion in the world to come. So, if everyone has a portion of the world to come, so how can you say these are the ones who don't? So it's explained that what it means is that there are certain people who in their lifetime, they lived on such a low grade of morality. They stuffed up so badly that they lose their portion in the world to come. Their soul, on the other hand, will be reincarnated in another form that will correct their wrongs, and their soul will make it to the world to come. Because every Jewish soul will be maintained and will make it to the world to come. However, in that form, in that particular lifetime, with this particular name, they're not going to make it. But that soul will go in another lifetime and will make it to the world to come. So all souls are righteous on the deepest level. Not all lifetimes are righteous, and so therefore not all bodies will make it to the world to come, but all souls will. That's how it's explained. So how do you get from there to say that Gentiles also have a place in the world to come? So number 4 is another quote from Maimonides in his commentary on that Mishnah. He says that the Mishnah lists Bilam as someone who has no portion in the world to come. Now by listing Bilam, who was Bilam? Bilam was a non-Jewish prophet who was hired to curse the Jewish people, and even though his curse was unsuccessful, he did give advice to morally harm the Jewish people, and he was a sworn enemy of the Jews. And so even though he was a prophet, meaning he reached very high levels of spiritual realization, but morally he did not reach high levels. He was very lowly. And so therefore he's listed as somebody who does not have a portion in the world to come. Now the very adding of his name in a list of people who don't have a portion in the world to come, what does that imply? That he could have had a portion of the world to come, he just didn't because of his immorality. He's a non-Jew. So the fact that he's listed as someone who doesn't have a portion of the world to come means that non-Jews generally can have a portion in the world to come. However, Bilam, who was wicked, does not. This is Maimonides' source. The inference of the Mishnah is Maimonides' source that the righteous of the nations do have a portion in the world to come. If you look at the actual Mishnah at number 5, this is the Mishnah where it comes from. Every Jew has a portion in the world to come, as it states, your people are all righteous, they will inherit the land for eternity, the sprout of my planting, the work of my hands, of which I'm proud. That's the verse in Isaiah. That's what the Mishnah quotes as its source, that every Jew has a portion in the world to come, because your people are all righteous. But there are 3 kings and 4 commoners who do not have a portion. The 3 kings are Yeravam, Achav, and Menashe, 3 Jewish kings. The 4 commoners are Bilam, Doeg, Achetophel, and Gehazi, who do not have a portion in the world to come.
Who's the last one?
Gehazi, he was a character mentioned in Tanakh. So Bilam is non-Jew. And the fact that he's mentioned here as not having a portion of the world to come can be inferred that non-Jews do have a portion of the world to come, but not someone like Bilam, not someone who is evil and unrighteous such as Bilam. That's Maimonides' source. Now, Rambam Maimonides, when he makes his halachic statements, so all that he says has to have a source somewhere. He doesn't make things up out of nowhere. And so here too, his statement, number 3, is almost a direct quote from the Mishnah, which is number 5 here. But you might notice, if you look very carefully, you might notice a discrepancy between Maimonides' quote and the Mishnah. He starts off exactly the same. Every Jew has a portion of the world to come. That's word for word a quote from the Mishnah, as it states, and he quotes the verse. Maimonides quotes the verse, your people are all righteous, they will inherit the land for eternity. In the Mishnah, there's a bit of a longer quote from Isaiah. It says, your people are all righteous, they will inherit the land for eternity, the sprout of my planting, the work of my hands, of which I am proud. Maimonides does not quote that full verse He just quotes the first half of it. Why indeed? Why doesn't he quote the full verse? This has to be significant. If Maimonides is quoting a Mishnah, he should quote it in full. If he does not quote it in full, it must be a reason. Now, it could be that Maimonides had a different version of this Mishnah, and the Mishnah that he had did not quote the full verse. That's possible. But even that is significant. Why did he choose to quote that particular version of the Mishnah? Because in describing the world to come, there are different opinions as to what the world to come is referring to. Because as far as reward after this lifetime, there are two versions of reward. There are two places that we are rewarded for our deeds in this world. One is in heaven, or the Garden of Eden, paradise, a soul without a body. And the other is the resurrection of the dead, where souls re-enter into bodies and live a life of divine closeness and bliss. Both of these are rewards for good deeds we do in this world. One reward is in a different lifetime, in a different world, in a higher world, and one of them is down here. The world to come could refer to either one. And in some places it clearly refers to this, some places it clearly refers to that. There are some places where the world to come means heaven. There are some places where the world to come means the resurrection of the dead. The question is, in this Mishnah, what's it talking about? Maimonides' opinion is that the world to come in this Mishnah means heaven, means souls without bodies. You go to heaven, to an afterlife outside of the body. And that's why when he quotes this verse that is supporting the idea that every Jew has a portion of the world to come, he only quotes the first half of the verse, not the last half. Because the last half of the verse seems to be referring to the physical body. What does it say? The last half of the verse says, "The sprout of my planting, the work of my hands of which I am proud." This is God speaking, saying that every Jew is righteous and will be rewarded. And he describes the Jewish person as being the work of my hands of which I'm proud. What's the work of God's hands? That can only be referring to the body, not to the soul. Well, it is referring to, what, you mean the land?
Yeah, when they talk about land.
Okay, so Maimonides already says that the land here is talking about a metaphorical land, because you're inheriting it for eternity, forever and ever, so it's an eternal, spiritual type of land. And
the word Arts can mean the world as well, not just the land. So you've got to
correct.
talk about that as well.
Yep, correct. So when Maimonides says, does not quote the end of the verse, it's because the end of the verse talks about the work of my hands. What is the work of my hands? What's it referring to? It can't be referring to the soul, because the soul is not work of hands, the body is. In the creation of the human being, the soul was created through God's breath. The body was created through God shaping it with his hands, as it were. And so it's the body that's referred to as the work of my hands, not the soul. So the end of that verse seems to be talking about the body, not the soul. Maimonides leaves that out. It's not in his version of the Mishnah, because he believes this Mishnah is talking about the soul in the afterlife, not the body in the resurrection of the dead. When it says that every Jew has a portion in the world to come, Maimonides says the world to come is talking about the ultimate reward, which is not in bodies, in souls. This we see from number 6. Further in the laws of repentance, Maimonides says the world to come is an existence without a body, but rather souls of the righteous without bodies like angels. And therefore there is no eating or drinking or any other bodily experiences like sitting or standing, sleeping or dying, sadness or happiness. Rather, it is as the sages said, the righteous sitting with crowns on their heads, basking in the rays of the divine presence. So Maimonides says, and this is his opinion that he expounds in several of his writings, the ultimate reward, the ultimate place that we're going is a heavenly existence, otherworldly existence. That is the ultimate reward. The world to come, which is referring to the end of times, the utopian existence, is talking about life outside of a body. And so according to Maimonides, the passage of history goes like this, that we live in this world in a physical body. After you die, you go into heaven. At a certain point in history, there'll be a resurrection of the dead where souls will come back into bodies. But finally, ultimately, the end goal is we will leave those bodies again and live an eternal spiritual life, souls without bodies. And that will be the end of times, and that will go forever. An ultimate, eternal, infinite bliss, basking in the glory of God. That is how Maimonides understands the passage of history. And so when it talks about the world to come, says Maimonides, the world to come really must refer to a heavenly existence. That's the world to come. Resurrection is something that will happen in between, but only for a temporary time. We will then go, leave bodies and live in heaven. And this world will be done with, it'll be finished with. That was Maimonides' description of the future. So, therefore, his understanding of the Mishnah, every Jew has a portion of the world to come, and non-Jews also have a portion of the world to come. What's that talking about?
Righteous.
It's talking about souls outside of bodies, going to heaven. That all Jews will reach there because every Jewish soul is righteous after a few incarnations. Non-Jewish people will also reach there. Not someone like Bilam, who's wicked, but a righteous non-Jew will reach heaven, will go to heaven. That's what Maimonides' opinion is. Now, this leaves us with no contradiction. When it says above in the Midrash that the revival of the dead is for the Jews, unlike the rains that's for Jews and idolaters, so what is that telling us? So we could say, quite simply, that non-Jews don't experience resurrection of the dead, but they do go to heaven. The question that we're left with is why? Why would a non-Jew be privy to the world to come, invited to experience the ultimate level, but not resurrection of the dead? And we're also left with a bit of a question with Maimonides' explanation. What is exactly the resurrection of the dead for? Why are souls sent back to earth and then eventually go back to heaven? If the ultimate is to be in heaven, so why would we bother souls that are in heaven to come back down to earth for a temporary time and then send them back to where they came from? What's the idea of the resurrection of the dead? So this question, what the resurrection is for, why there is a resurrection in the first place, is dealt with in the Talmud, albeit in a roundabout way. The Talmud, there was a discussion in the Talmud about the relationship between the soul and the body. And there's an interesting metaphor that the Talmud uses to understand the relationship between soul and body. It's number 7 at the bottom of your sheet. The Talmud says the following story. A king once owned a beautiful orchard with luscious fruits. He appointed 2 guards over it. One blind, the other lame. They were the 2 guards that he appointed. The lame one said to the blind one, I see some tasty looking fruit in this orchard. Carry me inside and I'll pick some so we can eat. And so they did. So the blind man carried the lame man gave directions, and the blind man provided the transport, and they went in, picked the fruit and ate it together. Some days later the king returned and said, where's my fruits? So the lame one said, do I have legs that could carry me to reach them? I couldn't have taken them, I don't have legs. I'm lame. The blind one said, do I have eyes that I could see them? I'm blind. I couldn't have stolen them because I can't even see. So what did the king do? He hoisted the lame man on the blind man's shoulders and judged them as one. Did you get that story? Understand what happened? Each one is saying, well, I couldn't have done it. I'm lame. I mean, maybe that's why the king appointed them as guards, because he didn't want them to steal the fruit. So a lame person won't be able to get there. A blind person won't see where they're going, so they'll be perfect guards. Yeah, who would they guard from? Maybe they're more like scarecrows. But they make a partnership. The lame one can't walk, but the blind one can. The blind one can't see, but the lame one can. So by the blind one picking up the lame one, they can go and pick the fruit and eat it. So when they claim innocence When the king comes home, they say, well, how could I get it? I'm lame. I'm blind. How could I get it? The king says, okay, I'm putting you on your shoulders, and I'm judging you as one person. And now you're capable of stealing. Now you're guilty. You're responsible for what you did. So the Talmud uses this story as an explanation that we could say that both soul and body could defend themselves and argue that they couldn't have possibly sinned. A body's argument that I didn't sin, that I can't be responsible for sin, is that if you look at a body after it's dead, after the soul leaves it, the body is just like a rock. It's like lifeless, it's inanimate. So how could the body be responsible for sinning? The body can't move on its own. It's the soul's fault. The soul then says, hang on a minute, look at me when I've left the body. After the soul leaves the body, is it interested in sinning? No, it flies up to heaven and has no connection with this world. Certainly no connection with sin. So the soul argues that it must be the body's fault. So God says, I'm going to put you together and judge you together as one. Soul and body. So you could also use that same metaphor to explain the necessity for the resurrection of the dead. That if our reward would only be in the afterlife, meaning in heaven, souls without bodies, so then that's not fair, because the soul, it cannot be the only one to be rewarded for the good deeds we do, because the soul alone cannot do good deeds. The body also can't do good deeds on its own, and so only soul returned into the body can receive the ultimate reward for good deeds that you do in this lifetime. That the soul without the body is lame. The body without the soul is blind. A soul without a body cannot express itself, cannot move, cannot achieve. A body without a soul has not got vision, hasn't got a sense of right and wrong, is not able to do anything. So only soul and body together is the person, is the you. And so therefore, to say that our reward is in an afterlife without a body, that's not fair. The body was part and parcel of the achievement of doing goodness in this world. So it's only together with the body, the soul back in the body, that the reward comes. And that's why there's a resurrection of the dead.
Which body does the soul make?
So you're saying if you live many times, many lifetimes, so the parts of the soul that were fulfilled with that body go back to that body. The parts of the soul that were only fulfilled in the next lifetime go with that body. So the different components of the body, of the soul. So this is why resurrection is a necessary thing. Now this, it would seem, should apply equally to Jews and non-Jews. Because as far as doing goodness in this world, that is not the unique arena of Jews. Jews are not the only people who do good. Non-Jews do good as well. And doing good in this world, it's something that is equally achieved through Jews and non-Jews. So both of them do it with a soul and a body. And so to say that a non-Jew can go to heaven but can't be resurrected doesn't seem to make sense. If a non-Jew in their lifetime has achieved goodness, that's a soul in a body. So their reward should be a soul and a body, not one without the other. So just like a Jew is expected to be resurrected in order to receive full reward, so to a non-Jew should be. So it seems that it's only fair that a non-Jew should also be resurrected just like a Jew. Now the truth is, we can learn that way as well, and we can understand that a non-Jew does get resurrected just like a Jew. Because our entire discussion till now was all going according to Maimonides' understanding of the Mishnah, that says that every Jew has a portion in the world to come, and Bilam does not have a portion in the world to come, so other non-Jews do as well. That, according to Maimonides, is talking about the world to come, is talking about going to heaven. However, Maimonides is not the only voice on this topic. There is another opinion, another way of explaining this, which has actually become more accepted than Maimonides' explanation. And that is the explanation of Nachmanides, the Ramban. Nachmanides, a contemporary of Maimonides, who had a more mystic bent to him than Maimonides. Maimonides was more known as a philosopher, whereas Nachmanides was known as a mystic and a Kabbalist as well. And so Nachmanides and the mystical school of Judaism had a different approach to what the world to come means in this Mishnah, and generally what the system of history, how it works. While Maimonides said that we live in this world, go to heaven, then there's a resurrection at a certain point, and then eventually we go back to heaven, and that's where we spend eternity. Nachmanides, Ramban, and the Kabbalists after him said that no, that's not the way things go. We live in this world, in a physical world. After we die, we go to heaven. Heaven is a transit, a waiting place where souls remain until the revival of the dead, when souls come back into this world and live an eternally spiritual life in the physical world, in bodies down here. And that's where the ultimate reward is, in here, back here in this world. A very radical change from Maimonides' view, that heaven is not the ultimate place, this earth is the ultimate place. It's not souls disembodied, but souls in their bodies. That is how we will spend eternity. That will be the ultimate reward. That's what Nachmanides said, and he had several proofs and backings to his opinion, and disagreed with Maimonides. One of his proofs, and one of the proofs to this opinion, is from the very discussion in the Talmud, where it says that every Jew has a portion of the world to come, and it then says, and these are the people who do not have a portion of the world to come. One of the people it lists as someone who does not have a portion of the world to come is somebody who denies belief in the resurrection of the dead. That's what it says in the Mishnah. Somebody who denies the resurrection of the dead, who doesn't believe in it, does not have a portion of the world to come. So the Talmud explains why. Because if you deny it, you don't get it. If you don't believe in it, you don't receive it. You're not a part of it. If you separate yourself from it, so then indeed you'll miss out. You won't get the world to come because you deny it. Now, one second. You don't get a portion of the world to come because you denied the resurrection of the dead. And the Talmud says, because you denied it, you don't get it. So you see the logic there? What's the world to come mean? It must mean the resurrection of the dead. Because if that's what you're denying, the world to come is the resurrection of the dead. Obviously it's the same thing. So this and many other proofs seem to support Ramban Nachmanides' opinion that the world to come is the resurrection of the dead. That is the ultimate reward. And therefore, the same inference that Maimonides made, that Nachmanides will also make, that if Bilam is not a portion of the world to come, other Gentiles do, and so therefore, Gentiles do have a portion of the world to come, meaning resurrection of the dead. As is only just and fair, because if the whole reason why we have a resurrection is to reward the soul and body together, because it's soul and body together that did the good deeds, so therefore non-Jews also deserve a portion in the world to come, meaning in the resurrection of the dead. And so that indeed is how Nachmanides understands it. The Kabbalists after him also understood it that way, as that is the correct system of creation. And so a Gentile will have a portion of the world to come. The problem with that is we're now back to a contradiction, because the Medrash we quoted, number 2, says that the rains might be for Jews and idolaters, but the revival of the dead is just for Jews. So how are we going to deal with that? Maimonides fit very nicely. That's talking about the resurrection of the dead, whereas the Mishnah is saying that Bilam doesn't have a portion in the world to come in heaven. Other Gentiles do, but not the resurrection of the dead. But according to this understanding now, we've got a contradiction. So we could then say that this statement of the Medrash is not ever mentioning the average Gentile. It's talking specifically about idolaters. That Jews, even Jews who are wicked, will have a portion of the world to come. As we said, even wicked Jews will, because their wickedness will eventually be cleansed in this lifetime or the next lifetime, and their righteousness will become revealed. Whereas an idolater, a non-Jew who worships idols and who does not keep the Noachad laws, will not have a portion of the world to come. That is indeed true. However, that does not say anything about a righteous Gentile. This Medrash doesn't mention the righteous Gentile. It's not referring to them. A righteous Gentile will indeed have a portion in the world to come, including the resurrection of the dead. And so, therefore, it doesn't have to be a contradiction at all, what this Medrash says. It could fit quite perfectly and quite neatly, that an idol worshipper that has no portion of the world to come, that's for sure. A righteous Gentile does. A Gentile who lived an upright and moral life will be resurrected at the time of the resurrection. Now, just in conclusion, what's interesting about this discussion, even though it seems very theoretical, the resurrection of the dead is not something that we've experienced. We're still alive, and whenever it'll happen. What difference does it make to us whether the resurrection of the dead is something in the future times, and that is the last point in creation, or if the resurrection of the dead is a temporary stage in the middle and the ultimate is going to be in heaven? What difference does it make? Is there any practical difference if we say this? Why would Nachmanides and Maimonides have such a debate whether the resurrection of the dead is just one stage, but the ultimate stage is going to heaven, or whether no, going to heaven is a transit and the ultimate stage is resurrection of the dead and living here in this world? This way or that way, whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. What difference does it make to us? What's the practical difference? Can you see any difference that it make in your life, whether this one or that one?
Yeah, you get us more chances in the world.
What do you mean?
In the practical world, you have more chances to improve your soul, whatever. But I've got a problem with it as well.
Well, either way, you have a lifetime to live and to improve, and either way you'll go to heaven, and either way there'll be a resurrection of the dead. What difference does it make if the ultimate, the final destination is heaven or earth? What difference would that make?
One seems more earthly, practical, and the other one is very esoteric. You're not sure really. There's no paradigm. There's no definition of what it really is anywhere.
Yeah. Well, it would certainly change your respect for this world. If you think about it, if a person lives in such a way that this world is a temporary life, and the universe, the physical universe, the body we inhabit, all this is merely a means to a higher end, and the ultimate is to go to heaven. If that's how you think, so then you can see how you would hold this world and your body with a certain disdain, with a certain lack of respect, because it's not about the body. The body is actually just a limitation. It's finite, it has an end to it, and it just gets in the way of the soul. The ultimate is the soul should be free of the body. And so going to heaven, that is the ultimate. And so therefore, your attitude to the body would be to minimize it, to lessen it, and the less the body is in the way, the better. And the soul is really what it's all about, which is a noble pursuit. But it's very different to saying that no, the body is actually the ultimate stage. What we're really aiming for is living a soulful life in a body. Ultimately, at the end of times, that's what we will do. We will live in this physical world with a spiritual awareness, and our physical body will be a house for the soul, not a blockage for the soul. If that's the attitude, so then we work together with the body, not against the body. We see the body as being a vehicle for spirituality, not an obstacle to spirituality. It's to be refined and to be educated and to be elevated and lifted, not to be denigrated and pushed aside. It's a very different attitude to the world and to the body. And so you can see how there would be very practical ramifications to these two different belief systems. That a belief system which most religions do share, that heaven is the aim and this world is not what it's about, it somehow lessens our respect for this world. We don't have to take this world so seriously. Whereas a belief that this world is the ultimate place where we're going to spend eternity, and this is what it's all about, it's about souls in bodies, means that this world is a very precious world. This is where God's desire is. And the body, the physical body, is not something to be disrespected either. It is the handiwork of God, of which He is proud.
You hear all these stories about people giving up their place in the Lamaba or a portion of it. Is that kind of myths, or is there really something else?
There are true stories of people who gave up their portion of the world to come for a certain thing, or they gave it to somebody else. But they say that the reward you get for doing that is so good that it might be worth it. But yeah, that's true.
For very small mitzvahs.
That's right.
To prove.
Correct. But it does say in the Talmud that one moment of doing a mitzvah in this world is worth all the world to come. That doing a mitzvah in this world is much more powerful than the enjoyment of the world to come. Was that? But there's also the idea that the world to come is when we get pleasure. But this world, when we do a mitzvah, God gets pleasure. God gets pleasure out of us doing a mitzvah. We get pleasure out of our soul basking in His glory, but He gets pleasure out of us doing a mitzvah. So what's greater, our pleasure or His pleasure? His pleasure is infinitely greater than our pleasure. So even if we're not feeling it, but we're doing it, we're generating that.
His pleasure is our pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't get reincarnated, like now.
Do non-Jews get reincarnated? Yes. It does seem that there is idea of reincarnation amongst non-Jews as well. It's not exclusively a Jewish thing.
You said that he has a nefesh of a kiss, right? Obviously, the boy doesn't, so it's not the nefesh of his kiss. Is what we're doing at.
Yeah. There's soul in everything. The soul is not a exclusively Jewish thing. Non-Jews have souls, and that also non-humans have souls as well. Animals, plants, minerals have souls, and those souls go through various transmigrations.
And they're judged as well.
No, they're not held responsible because they don't have free choice. So they can't be judged. They can't be judged for what they do. Only humans have free choice and are therefore responsible for our actions. A non-human is not responsible.
No, like a goy.
A non-Jew is responsible for the actions. Absolutely, and is judged.
This kind of grown over the generations. I mean, there's a lot of people who've done a lot worse.
Absolutely, yeah. Bilam was just an example of somebody who went out to harm and hurt and is an example of somebody who does not have a portion. There are others for sure.
Well, why did they have come down to earth that were resurrected as dictators, murderers? How is that possible?
Well, everyone has free choice. The person has free choice as to how they use their talents and their life, and there are people who are very, very talented and use that for extreme evil. And so
does it mean that in a previous life they could have been good? Because logically speaking, if they were resurrected, they must have done good sometime.
we don't know what they were in a previous life, but if somebody lives a life and chooses evil, so then that was their thing. They can't blame it on the previous life. That's your choice. We're here to correct. So if you're sent down a second time, you're here to do better, not to do worse.
So there are neshamas that have done their complete tikkun and they're just kind of sitting on the loading dock for Mashiach to come.
That's right, and that's what heaven is for. That's what the Garden of Eden is for, souls who have completed their mission and who are now receiving reward, but not the ultimate reward. The ultimate reward will be when they come back into bodies. But in the meantime, they're sitting in a peaceful, comfortable place.
As you mentioned, each Jewish soul is righteous, just a matter of refinement. So how about those people being cut off during all the times, cut off among my people?
So that means in that lifetime they're cut off?
Yes, cut off from the life of the world.
Right. So for sometimes somebody's cut off in that lifetime. They've ruined their connection in that lifetime, so they're cut off. But their soul will come back in another time to correct what it did wrong.
So even the weakest Jewish people will be refined.
Yeah. Because there's a divine spark in the Jewish soul that can't be destroyed. That can't be got rid of. That's always going to come back to its source. So that divine spark will always return. All right. Yeah, he was one of the kings. Yeravam is Jeroboam. Yeravam is Jeroboam. Achav is Ahab, I think in English. Menashe is Manasseh. So they were, yeah.
And Doeg?
Yeah. Doeg is just Doeg, I think.
To the Hebrew word?
To worry.
I thought that was the name of one of the idols.
No, Doeg was in the time of King David. also in the time of King David, he was he taught King David, and then he went sour.
So he was a Jew as well.
Yep. And Gehazi, I think there are two opinions whether he was Jewish or not, if from memory.
Is there sometimes generations when you pass away till you're brought back? Or are you pretty much recycled? I know time doesn't have the same time frames.
Yeah, they're not necessarily the souls come straight back.
Because I heard once that like our generation is the Neshamas of the Shalom of Kibbutz. So that's kind of the same generation. I don't know.
Could be.
I don't know, like our generation is the souls of the Lord.
Yeah.
All right, we'll stop there. We've got a lecture next door with Rabbi Lida.